On this episode of Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene, Dr. Willard C. Ashley Sr., educator, CEO, and mental health professional, answers the question, where do we land with white fragility? And how can ordinary citizens hold our power in conversations about race? This episode originally aired May 5th, 2021.
Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you again here on the Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene. As you know, I am Eugene Holden, and my co-host, the Reverend Lane Cobb, will be with you in just a moment. Again, I want to welcome you to Race Talk Revolution. This is, believe it or not, the last session of our fourth eight-week series, Race Talk Revolution series. This is the last session of our fourth, I had to say this again, our fourth 8-week Race Talk series. And today we're really excited about our guest. Our guest today is Dr. Willard Ashley Sr. Dr. Ashley is a coach, he's a consultant, he's a psychotherapist, and racial justice activist. Our topic on this afternoon is Hold Your Power. Ordinary citizens can win. Now, as usual, our guest speaker will, be with us for about an hour. He's going to speak. We're going to have a dialogue for about a half an hour. And then, because it is our wrap-up session for this series, we will invite whoever wants to stick around and say anything you'd like to say, to stick around after that hour. Again, the length of the program is about an hour. Then we'll have a Q&A. Like I said, we're going to have a discussion between, between Dr. Ashley, myself, and Lane, and then we'll get into a Q&A. Now, I want to remind everyone right now to stay muted for right now. Then when it comes down to the Q&A, we're going to ask you to raise your hand. Now, remember, how you raise your hand is to go to the bottom of your screen, go to the reactions, and hit that raise hand button. And I will make sure to get to you on that. If you don't have that option, the reactions on the bottom of your screen, go to the participants, locate your name, and then hit more. And it's going to say more options, and then you can find that there, the raise hand option there. On the Q&A, as usual, with the questions, we want to limit your questions and or comments to a minute or less, because as usual, we have a lot of people who may want to speak, and we want to give people time to do that. Now, one more reminder, right? Because Race Talk Revolution is a platform where your voice matters. We want to make sure that we are respectful, to have an inclusive conversation where every voice is heard and every voice is appreciated. And as we like to say, every voice matters. My co-host, Reverend Lane Cobb.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I can't believe that we have had now 4 8-week series. I'm so excited and can't wait. We're going to bring you some great stuff in the 5th in June, but we are so pleased to have you with us today. And we are happy also to welcome Dr. Willard Ashley Sr. And I'm just going to read a very, very brief bio, but I do recommend that you go. I will put his information in the chat so that you could actually go and read more about him and see some of his great books that he has and the work that he is doing. Willard Walden Christopher Ashley Sr. is the president and CEO of Dr. Willard Ashley Sr. LLC, Montclair, New Jersey. And under this umbrella, Ashley conducts webinars, consultation, counseling, and coaching. Dr. Ashley is a trustee and faculty member of the New Jersey Institute for the Training in Psychoanalysis. He is also a trustee of Andover Newton Seminary at Yale Divinity School. Ashley is a vocational coach with the Center for Career Development and Ministry. He is the president and CEO of Unity with Diversity, a charitable think tank on diversity, race, and racial inequalities, and founding partner of Mission Unloaded. Let me say that again. He is a founding partner of Mission Unbounded, a consulting company that matches assets with the mission. Ashley was the second African American to be granted tenure and the first African American dean of the Seminary, New Brunswick Theological Seminary. He has published 4 books focusing on faith, leadership, and spiritual care. And again, these are only some of his numerous accomplishments. I encourage you to seek him out and read more. So Dr. Ashley, welcome to you. Welcome, welcome. So happy to have you with us. You and I spoke about how even the most experienced activists are feeling the wear and tear of our current political climate. And of course, people of color have been bearing the burden of racial trauma for centuries. You introduced me to a concept in our conversation, and that concept was what you call emotional homelessness. And I'd love for you to talk a bit about what emotional homelessness is and how that affects us and how we can work our way around that. How do we heal that in ourselves? And you also offer to address 2 questions with us today that I'm clear all of us are looking for the answer right now. And those are, where do we land with white fragility, number 1? And that is a very exciting question. If you have an answer for that, I can't wait to hear what it is. And number 2, how do we hold our power in these conversations? So with that, sir, I hand the mic over to you.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate the invitation to both of you as co-hosts, and I'm excited to be involved and engaged in this conversation. We are living in exciting times. They're challenging times, but they're exciting. And we're kind of like the U.S. Navy commercial. It's not a job, it's an adventure. And every day of our lives, every waking moment, it is an adventure. And so I'm grateful to those of you that have taken time out of your day to engage in this conversation, because I think that all of us on this call, those that are watching, that are on this part of it or look at it in other media, that we have to be part of the solution, that we have to commit to be part of the solution. And so my thesis, if you will, is that ordinary citizens do have power. That's my thesis. That's my hypothesis, that ordinary citizens have power. The subtext is that politicians, power brokers, etc., that they do listen. They don't listen to us. They listen to special interest groups, listen to the lobbyists, listen to those who write the checks to get them elected and reelected. They listen within party lines, partisan party lines. So they do listen, but they don't listen to us, ordinary citizens. So part of our work is that there's 3 ways to respond to what we may call unrest, social challenges. One is that we provide service. So I'm a psychoanalyst, marriage and family therapist person, pastor. So we provide a service, right? As an individual, as a group, you come see us and we talk about what's going on and we provide service. We have grants, etc. There's one way. The second way, which seems to be most popular, is we mobilize. And something happens in the community, be it locally or globally, and we do internet, we find ways to communicate. We say, we're going to show up on the March on Washington. We're going to show up at this. We're going to mobilize folks. And then they can see how we feel about this issue. Too often, folks that are well-meaning get stuck in mobilization and don't engage in the third and most important part, which is organizing. And so we find our power. I mean, we mobilize, so we bring 10,000 people to an event. But that is simply to say, good morning, hello, good afternoon, good evening. Invite us to the table so we can now negotiate demands. We can negotiate policy changes. We can negotiate what needs to be done next. And so that's where the work of organizing comes in. And that's where we, quote unquote, we ordinary citizens have our power. And so it's real clear to me. My quote unquote latest book that should be out in a month or two is New Rules for Radicals, TNT for Faith-Based Leaders. Tactics and Techniques is the TNT. And yes, you guessed it. It's a spinoff, if you will, of Saul Alinsky back in the 70s when he wrote Rules for Radicals. A lot of this happened in the last 50 years or so since Alinsky put the book out. And I look at it through the lens of how I show up in the world. Alinsky was a social worker, University of Chicago graduate in his early stages, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a Black Baptist pastor. And so unlike Alinsky, I have a different set of accountabilities. I have to show up every Sunday to the same group of people. And some of whom agree with me, some of whom do not. And what is it like when you have that tension, if you will? And so in New Rules for Radicals, we have this conversation about how do we claim our power and sustain it, and that there are no quick fixes. They're not going to make racism go away, systemic, institutional, or otherwise, overnight. And so how do we stay together during the roller coaster ride that takes place in addressing any kind of social justice issue? And so my starting point, if you will, is that as Americans, and let's just stick with systemic racism in America, that as Americans, that we have withstood widespread polarization, intimidation, manipulation, and alienation. And as a result of that I think that people on this call are calling for or demanding a return, if you will, to the days of civility, to the moment where we can have compassion for one another as human beings, regardless of how you vote, regardless of how you look, just having simple compassion, common civility for one another. And here's a radical concept: having conversation. They don't have to agree with you, but at least give you the respect to engage in a conversation. And as a marriage and family therapist, I say with couples, and when you have a conversation, you may actually discover the other person had a point. And you might hear it differently if you stop long enough to say, let me listen to you. And that's where my heart breaks, because I grew up in an era where, at least I like to think romantically, we did at least listen to each other on both sides of the aisle. And again, don't have to agree. You may be independent, liberal, conservative, but at least try to hear each other out and to find the common ground, if you will. And so we think about civility, compassion, conversation, collaboration, that we work together in this conversation about how do we save the planet, if you will. And the one that gives me the greatest amount of angst, if you will, is courage. We can teach a lot of things in grad school, in undergrad. We can teach a lot of things in PhD programs, internal degree programs. But how do you teach courage? I mean, I think it's something that you have to have within. I can try to bring it out of you and encourage you to use your courage. But I think too often that in many of these situations, be it small or large, that we lack courage. I work sometimes with other clinicians, and I'll push them and I'll agitate about how do you bring up racialized trauma in your practice. I say, oh, well, I have all white patients. Exactly. All the more reason to talk about racialized trauma in your practice. And then after going back and forth, usually they land at some variation of, I'm afraid. But what can happen? They may leave. Okay. And what could happen after that? I mean, to take the courage, or you may find they discover a growing edge. And if we're talking about people being holistic, I find it hard pressed, regardless of your ethnicity and how you show up in the world, that you don't have some opinion about race and racism in America. You can't turn on the television, is not confronted by it. President Biden said very early on in his presidency, what is it? He noticed that at least 3 out of 5 television commercials now have interracial couples. We see that. People have some kind of reaction to that, good or bad. You can't say, oh, I just totally dismissed it. So this whole notion of courage. And what I do share is the need for creativity, that we can't be so predictable. That my dad and the work that he did would always challenge me working in Harlem, saying, hey, you can't be so predictable. You can't be so routine. If you know at 3:05, he turns the corner. If you want to take him out, we know where to find him. So a sense of working with politicians that can sometimes be tone deaf, with Fortune 100s that can sometimes be tone deaf, a sense of creativity. They didn't see the punch coming. Didn't see that, wasn't prepared for that. And then I think also the need for character. Not to be characters, although sometimes we can be, but to have character. Because in the work that we do, we're always going to be under the microscope. And oftentimes when you deal with social justice issues, they'll put more emphasis on what you have done in life that was not your best moment, as opposed to, here's how we pollute the environment. And so in my mentors, they said, you may have done these bad things. Own it and say, you're right. I did these bad things. However, it doesn't change the fact that you're polluting the environment, that you're racist as all hell, that you have policies and practices that are not advantageous to people of the African diaspora. And so to have that kind of a conversation. So when we have that conversation, here's one of the places where white fragility meets black rage. One of the ways that we look at racism is we have difficulty holding in tension conflict. And so you come up with this idea of, I want to talk about racism, I want to talk about race. And then I say, well, I don't mind having the conversation with you if you don't make me show up in a way that's not authentic to who I am. And more of us as Black clinicians are abandoning the theory that I can't let you know as a white person how angry I am, because it does more damage to me to be able to have to hold in, and to use the term that Dr. Kenneth Hardy uses, to be a gem, good, effective, mainline minority. And he also was the one that had coined the term, if you will, talking about emotional homelessness. And that comes in because in our institutions and our organizations, we are welcomed. We welcome Reverend Dr. Willard Ashley because he checks all these boxes. Went to the right school, wrote the right kind of books, showed up in the right kind of places. So you look good on the brochure. You look great on the website. But the emotional homelessness comes that when I show up, it's clear I'm welcomed, but I don't belong. I don't fit in. You're not my friends. You're not the folks that we share common values other than we cash a check doing this work together. But beyond that, I don't feel as though this is a place where, here we go, I feel safe, that I can say that I have a minimal amount of mistrust, and that I can be comfortable showing up who I am as I am and not have to fit into one of the boxes that's been created. And so you can appreciate that in my world, I have a ton of boxes people try to put me in. And I'm always saying, no, no, no. So I drive people crazy. Oh, you're the Black Baptist pastor box. Yeah, that's one of my boxes. But I'm also a psychoanalyst. Oh, wait, okay, so you're the Black Baptist pastor, you're a psychoanalyst. Okay, we got you figured out. No, because I'm also a professor. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so we got 3 boxes now. Oh, and by the way, I'm from Harlem and I play basketball. It's still in my age. So the boxes just like, whoa, 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 you have too many boxes. Well, all of us have too many boxes. That's a universal. You go through your multiple identities, you also have too many boxes, if you will. So what happens when we can collapse all of those boxes, when we can then say, hey, what does it mean that we can be human beings? I like that box. And within that box, we may have differences of opinion. We may have hurt sometime unintentionally, but we can work it through because I see the common humanity in you, and you see and respect the common humanity that's found within me. So the fragility part comes out very, very clearly when we have difference of opinion as to how bad is it. And we engage in what I call oppression contests. And so I say, ouch, and you say Holocaust. I say which one, and you're incensed. And I say, well, in my neighborhood, there's more than one. There's the one that happened in the 1940s. There's the one that happened in 1619. Which one are we referring to? Yours is most recent one, and it's horrible. And I find as a Black person, I'm always having to do this disclaimer. What you went through was horrible. It was deplorable, comma, but it doesn't negate my experience as a Black man in America. And if I don't put the disclaimer before I talk about my experience, then you tell me I'm insensitive. You share with me that you don't understand that I've gone through oppression also. And so it adds an extra burden, and it makes one feel as though you don't have a home. You don't have a place where you don't have to explain who you are. And again, leaning heavily on Dr. Kenneth Hardy, he makes the point of saying that as a Black person, we spend so much of our life, and I'm adding to it, and it's life and death, saying to white people what we are not. I'm not dangerous. If I don't communicate at 6'2", 220 something pounds, that I'm not dangerous, it can cost me my life. I had this surreal moment yesterday. You go on my Facebook page and I posted congratulatory certificate from the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office. I have a proclamation from the executive for Bergen County where I live. And I'm going, wow, this is really great. 6:30 in the morning, I'm going to get a bagel. And I recognized from my Harlem experience that the police are following me and following the car I'm in. And it's a nice car. It's not like, oh, how can you afford that? It's a nice car. And I pull up in front of the bagel shop, and the owner recognized what was going on. So he comes out and says, hey, how you doing, Dr. Ashley? Come on in and get a bagel. And then the police drove off. And I couldn't say, look at my Facebook page. The prosecutor said I'm a great guy. You saw me as a Black male wearing jeans and comfortable in my sneakers at 6:30 in the morning going to get a bagel. And that was problematic. And so what about me said I'm dangerous? Or how did I communicate I'm not dangerous so that I could live to have this conversation with you? And as sure as I'm saying this to you, you interview any other Black person, they will have at least one recent experience of something like that. And so when we talk about white fragility, I'm constantly saying I'm not a threat. I'm not dangerous. Oh, and I'm not too Afrocentric. I love Africa and I love all things Black. But if I'm too Afrocentric, if I wear my hair, if I had hair too braided, or I have too many dreads, or I wear Afro stuff too many times, I scare folks. And so policies get put in place that you can't wear this, you can't wear that. There's documentation that shows that if you wear certain things, if you show up certain, you've seen the research, if your name is Shaniqua and you have the same exact CV as somebody named Susie, everything is the same except for the naming, that Susie gets invited for an interview more often than not, and Shaniqua does not. And so we have this piece, and there's, I guess, a twin sister of the white fragility is the fear to talk about honestly anti-blackness. And so I've given up on the term racism. I get paid to talk about it. In my professional life, I have to talk about it, but I'm growing more and more weary of talking about racism, be it individual, systemic, or institutional, because too many other groups now are hanging on to the coattails of racism. And even when you do that, it doesn't really zero in on anti-blackness. So you can define racism in ways that include a lot of other groups. But even when you have that conversation, when you talk about what anti-blackness, that pinpoints a different experience of being in America. I hope I'm in the right building and that I'm touching somebody in that regard. And so I end my diatribe, if you will, on that we have power. You have power, but the power only happens when we recognize each other's common humanity and we agree to work together. And our co-host should have known, you ask a Black Baptist preacher to say 5 minutes, and there we go.
No, this is all perfect. This is all perfect. And I'm going to hand the conversation over to Eugene. There's so much that I wrote down and so many things I want to ask, but we've already got people in the chat saying they want to ask some things. So maybe we'll go ahead and do that. This is just wonderful. We could keep you for 2 days here, and you know this. Sarah, would you like to ask your question, or would you like me to ask it?
Want to ask it for me? My question was, this real distressing statement by Tim Scott that he sees America as not a racist country, which somehow seems to have boxed President Biden and Kamala Harris into a corner by saying, no, America's not a racist country. How do you understand that, first of all, and how do you respond?
My quick, simple answer, not to be dismissive of his comment, is take an Undoing Racism workshop. 2.5 days of Undoing Racism, where we talk about the history, not just any particular incident, but the history of laws that were put in place in the United States, and having a deeper appreciation of the various manifestations of racism, how it shows up. So that's probably, he probably won't take the workshop, but if he did, I think he may have a different appreciation. And also, you know, when we have these conversations, we first get off track because we don't have a common definition. So we're not having a common definition. What you may define as racism may not be how I define it. So that in and of itself is problematic. I mean, you know, graduate school 101, define your terms, right? So we're making sure we're on the same track. Deal with your assumptions. And so when people blurt these things out, we usually don't have a common definition. We're not in agreement on, they don't state their assumptions. And so that we start off on the wrong foot.
Yeah. Thank you. Make sure. Okay. Yeah. Felicia has a question, but I just want to go back to something you were speaking about, walking, you know, down the street 6:30 in the morning to go get the bagel. An interesting thing that came out is that the owner of the bagel shop recognized what was going on and then came out. My question, Dr. Ashley, was he Black or not? But it's interesting because he recognized what was going on.
white German guy
Yeah.
who normally sits by the front door and greets people as they come in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he was watching what was happening and came out and
Yeah.
said, "Hey, how you doing? Yeah, come on in, grab yourself a bagel."
Yeah. Yes, that's amazing. That says a whole lot there. Let me go to Felicia.
Dr. Ashley, I really appreciate how directly and clearly you enumerate many of the problems that we're facing right now. A lot of people want to think it's in the past, it used to happen. And I'm particularly touched by your concept of emotional homelessness. I was just in a session last night with graduate students from Stanford, MBA students, and Black students had an opportunity to talk about their experience in a safe environment. And my experience in these conversations is white people really want to help and be supportive, but as soon as they start hearing how hard it is, they go into shame and to guilt and to not knowing what to say. And so I'm wondering, in these conversations, what you suggest. How can we work with that aspect of white fragility as it meets the sincere desire to be open to the Black experience?
So thank you for that question, and thank you for the work that you do. Since the pandemic, and I guess since George Floyd and others that have been killed at the hands of police and white supremacy violence, I've been leading these workshops with faculties across the globe, literally, and having this conversation. And I remember being invited to a local university, and they said, "Oh, we're going to have about 20 faculty present, so prepare yourself with 20 faculty." And I looked up, and there were 71 faculty members. And they were raising the very things that you're saying. I'm working with another local institution for their doctor of social work students, and the students were saying, "We love the institution, but until you brought up racialized trauma, it never came up." And this is one of the more progressive universities and one of the more progressive programs. And I said, well, one of the reasons is, look in the DSM-5. You won't find it there. It doesn't exist in there. They push us to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, but they don't talk about racialized trauma specifically. And so one of the ways I help people to grasp this is say, you need to go on the People's Institute website and look at their principles. That's public information. They list their principles. And looking at their principles, it helps to give one a guide in how do you have this conversation. Not to be a broken record, but the workshop is really advantageous. And so I try to get faculty members to have that conversation, to go to the workshop. I was dean for 5.5 years. And so I would emphasize to the faculty, it's one thing to say you should read these people from Asia and Africa. It's something different when it's required reading. So look at your list and don't have the ghettoized course on Black stuff, but weave it within the curriculum. How does the faculty speak to the students on a ongoing basis? I know saying anti-Blackness is a little scary, so let's think of it this way. Teach them how to be multicultural and how to be more cosmopolitan. And in so doing, we bring in voices from the Aboriginal or First Nation people in Australia. We talk about the people in Asia, and not just the ones that have white features, but the ones that are in other parts in Bangladesh that look more like me and darker. And how do we invite those voices in? And oftentimes, in my sarcasm, I do newsflash. They're actually scholars outside of Europe. I know it's hard to believe, especially in my field, but they do exist. If you spend a little bit of time, you can find them. And then I really get in trouble. May I call you Felicia? Is that okay? I really get in trouble when I say that evidence-based can oftentimes be crock. And they go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why do you say that? Because Pacific Islanders, people in the Caribbean, and in Africa have things that work, but they didn't publish it. But they work. And then you send your Fortune 100 folks down to that island and steal this stuff. And then you publish it as though it was your idea. And you get promoted, you get tenured, you become the expert, because now you're an expert on somebody else's experience that you never gave them the credit. So I get in trouble all the time. And I figure, you know what, at this point in my life, I'm in my mid-60s, I don't care.
Right with you there. Thank you, Dr. Ashley.
Okay.
So just real fast, is there anyone else who has a question? Go ahead and raise your hand. And as you're doing that, Gail, I saw your chat, and I'm wondering if you are willing to speak to that, because I think that it's important.
Which chat was that?
I'm sorry, I still don't get it.
Oh yes, this is so frustrating. I mean, maybe obviously I missed something. When you say you don't like to use the term anti-racism, you prefer anti-blackness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, immediately what just came to my mind was, does that, how, I don't want to say that I know you don't mean to exclude all the other anti, people. But it seems to me that anti-racism is all inclusive. It includes Blacks and Browns and Jews and indigenous peoples, et cetera, et cetera. So when you limit it, so to speak, to Blackness, I don't understand why you do that, I guess is what I'm saying. And I really want to understand.
Okay.
This.
And so as quickly as possible in current contemporary context, voter suppression is aimed at which group of people? Black people.
And brown.
Those 43 states that have now changed or changing the laws is to limit people that are Black, if you will. Black mean a global term, so you can say Black and brown, but it's a globalized term in that regard to keep them from voting. If we look at our history, this is not new. We had the slave laws and these kind of laws in place before. So that is a targeted group of people that have more melatonin than others. When I say racism, it starts to include people who are not being targeted in the same way that Black and brown people are being targeted. So that's why I'm saying that. When the GOP person mentioned yesterday about 3/5, who are we talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about Black and brown people. So that's why I'm saying that when I say racism, it is a much wider door, but it does, and sometimes it waters down the direct attacks on Black and brown people, or people from the African diaspora that landed in different continents and different countries, but had that common origin of having African roots. And what does that do? Then when I go academic, quote unquote, and talk about the social determinants of health and all the different ways that we measure those, 98% of the time, when we talk about people that have more melatonin, they're at the bottom of those measures. So that's my need to say, let's talk about anti-Blackness, because you take any of the isms, any oppression, and then you add the people of color to that oppression, and they still end up at the bottom of the measures. So that's how I arrived there.
I got that completely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you, Gail. We have Robert Harris who has his hand up, and then Jeff Randall after that. Go ahead and take yourself off mute, Robert.
Yeah, let me do it. Okay.
Yep, you got it.
All right. Okay. So, okay. So I want to thank Dr. Ashley for sharing just a ton of ideas, different perspective. Thank you so much. The thing that came to my mind was so in the little bit of work that I've done, it seems like what worked really well was to do some kind of shame reduction, some sort of awareness raising, and then a shame reduction work, and then people can talk. The thing is that in your context or contexts, talking about different boxes, different techniques. Are you aware of any kind of quick and dirty shame reduction things that can be done, or that you've done to maybe facilitate the getting to we're human, let's hear each other, let's not pivot, let's not use, hey, the term racism is too painful, so I'll pivot to something else, or you're not including this, so I'll pivot to something else. Because my sense is that at least part of the time that's about pain. But anyway, so the shame reduction techniques that you sort of have found successful, if it's even possible.
So thank you for the question. Clearly, we live in a shame-based society, shame-based culture. That is a starting point. So let's put that out there. And we look at undoing racism principles and a contract. We have two things that stand out: is no exits, and we struggle together. And so if we have a starting point that this is going to be difficult, and that we can't exit because I got my feelings hurt or I got misunderstood or whatever, and then we're going to struggle together. So that as a starting point, I use this illustration. There was a reporter who's going on home now, but he would write scathing articles about clergy in general and Black clergy in particular. And so one day I just had enough. I said, you know what? I'm tired of this, reading about, this clergy person did this and this one did that. I'm sick. So I called him up and I said, why do you always write all these disparaging things about clergy? Without missing a beat, he said, Rev, if you didn't do stupid things, I couldn't write about it.
Oh, God.
I said, touche. Stop doing stupid stuff, and I won't have to write about the stupid stuff that you guys do, or you guys and gals do with clergy. Touche. I'll be very transparent. I don't try to reduce the shame, because that's part of your work. That is part of your work. And one of the things that, talk about white fragility, one of the things that drives Black people away from these conversations, and I hear it every day I do this, is you don't want to do your work. And part of your work is owning the stupid, whatever racist stuff that's part of your heritage. So I'm not doing tissues. I do tissues for 45 minutes in my office. When I'm doing this kind of work, we're not doing tissues. Part of your work is to own your stuff. And you can say, well, I'm not like that. I've heard, yeah. But, privilege, you benefit from it. You may be the most liberal, love Black folks person in America. As one president said, we know that's not true, but that's what they said. But still, you can hail a cab. They won't stop for me. You benefit. I stand in line at 6'2", 225 pounds You walk in front of me as though I'm not standing there. And I go, excuse me, I was next in line. And the teller still works. The teller still serves you. And I say, ouch. And the security guy says, is there a problem? As though I did something wrong, saying, yes, I was next in line. So I don't try to do shame reduction. In my courses, when I'm talking about Bible or biblical stuff, I will say, yes, the Bible is very shame-based. When I'm talking about young ladies that got pregnant out of wedlock, and the church wants to shame them, I will step in on that and advocate and say, no, we're not going there. But when it comes to talking about dealing with racism and anti-blackness, I'm not doing shame reduction because you did that stupid stuff. You created, I didn't create this, you created it. Do your work.
Thank you. Robert, thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you.
We have Jeff, and then we have Adine, and then Tyrone.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Ashley. I want to share an experience I had yesterday that is pretty common for me. I was in Safeway, which is a large supermarket chain in California. Mm-hmm. And there was a young black man there. He had dreadlocks and wore his pants really, really low. And I was looking at this guy and I was feeling scared, feeling uncomfortable, but I was safe because I'm in Safeway. So I'm feeling safe. And I imagined how I'd feel if I was in a different context, where I would feel unsafe. Mm-hmm. Now, if this young man, and so I would, for example, if I was walking down the street at night, late at night, and I saw this young man was walking towards me, I'd feel threatened and I'd walk across the street. And this young man might be a totally chill guy, totally cool guy. And he's thinking, hey, another white guy walking across the street because I look like a thug or I look yada, yada, yada. And if this young man were on the screen right now, I'd have an opportunity to have a conversation with him. Mm-hmm. But at that moment, I don't have any opportunity to have any kind of conversation. So I'm going to play it safe. And I'm going to walk across the street. And that young man may feel, may feel very like, he's going to be upset, pissed off, feeling, like, why is he doing, on and on and on. And I'm kind of in this, I just want to put that out there because I remember Barack Obama, one of his talks after an incident where a young black man was killed, saying, I've had alternate experience of being on an elevator and an older white woman's there and she's holding on to her purse and how it made him feel. Well, I understood how the older white woman felt also. And in that moment where you cannot have a conversation, say, hey, let's get to know each other. It's a real stuck point for me. It's a real hard point for me because I don't know how to, there's nothing I can say or do in that situation, yet I know the consequences of it on that young man and myself that just happens because of the world we live in. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to put that out there, and anything you have to say or somebody else has to say, I'd appreciate it because it's just something that I'm working with myself on and being aware of and doing my work as best I can with it all of it,
So you mind if I call you Jeff?
No, please.
So Jeff, the state of New Jersey certified me as a psychoanalyst. I was certified as a group psychotherapist. But long before I was certified, I was a practicing psychotherapist because my life depended on it. What do you mean? I walked down the street in Harlem, Bed-Stuy, Jamaica Plains, Newark, you name it. And I see 6 young black kids walking toward me. My life depends on accurately reading who they are and what they're about. Are they just 6 kids that are teenagers having fun? Or is it gang initiation night and I'm in trouble? And every day of my life, I have to accurately read, am I in danger? And this is not just black kids. I live in a neighborhood that's mixed. I see 6 white kids walking toward me, and I'm trying to read, are they violent? Are they aggressive? Are they angry, radicalized black youth, white youth? And and will walking across the street save me? Or can I walk by them, through them, around them, and I'm going to be okay? That's every day of my life. And even more so, the last several years or the last several months before the George Floyd stuff, etc. A mentor of mine said this, and I've been trying to unpack this. I just heard it last week, and I've been trying to unpack it ever since. He said that America is in the early stages of grief at the thought of the death of racism. And those early stages are denial and anger.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I hear you.
Thank you. Whew, yes. Jeff, thank you for the courage to bring that up. We have Adine.
Wow, that last statement was incredible. That was, thank you very much, Dr. Ashley. And I apologize for coming in late to the call. I rushed in from a doctor's appointment to
You're right on time.
Yes. Before I get to my main point, I just want to say that women have to read male behavior constantly.
Absolutely.
Our lives, for our safety.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts at about age 9 or 10, and it goes on until we draw our last breath.
Absolutely.
And it's a constant. And if we read incorrectly, we could be in serious trouble.
Absolutely.
And that's around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to revisit what you talked about white guilt, white pain. I've frequently been chastised by other African Americans because I tend to be very outspoken in my racial attitudes, not to make white people feel guilty. And this is a point that I frequently bring up. Whenever I do something wrong, whenever I'm a part of something that I shouldn't have done, that I've been thoughtless and careless, my initial reaction is guilt, shame, and determination not to repeat it and try to right the wrong that I committed. So guilt and pain that whites may feel, I think is a healthy experience. It's part of the accountability process. If people don't feel guilt, don't feel shame, then they are indifferent. And indifference to the condition of an anti-Black indifference, as someone once said in either the New York Times or the Washington Post, is almost worse than racism. So I think we ought to stop shying away from making people feel momentarily guilty. Let them move on after that.
Absolutely. When I first became dean, and just to put that in context, the school was 230 years old when I was named the first Black dean. The school was 228 years old or 26 years old when they granted tenure to the first Black person. And I came maybe a year or two after that person. So it wasn't just he's the first Black. No, they went 226 years before they first granted tenure to someone looks like me. Another 230 years before they made their first Black dean, academic dean. Let me just put that part out there. And oftentimes the school would rather I not bring it up, but it's part of their history. And so I say that to say, so I'm sitting at my desk, I'm enjoying, wow, this is what the dean's office feels like. I'm sitting at my desk and the Black faculty walk in and plop down and say, we're glad that you're here. We support you, but we're tired. I go, okay, what a way to welcome the new Black dean. Read it. And they say, why are you tired? They say, because, and I quote, because white people will not do their work. And we're tired of doing their work for them. We're exhausted. We can't do this anymore. So don't read our silence as not supporting you. We're glad that you're there because we need a breather. Because we've been doing this work for too long and we're exhausted. And so to your point about the fragility and the guilt and the shame and all those things, part of the work is to own it. Part of the work is the reporter saying, if you didn't do this stuff, I couldn't write about it.
Thank you. We have Tyrone, then we have Frank, then Frida, and then Stephanie will be our last question for this session.
Dr.
Tyrone?
Ashley, you a bad brother. Let's start right there.
Well, thank you.
All right. John Hope Bryant used to say there's only thing one worse than hate. That's the bounce off of your statement, Adine, and that's indifference. Indifference is far worse than hate because no one gives a shit. Excuse my language, but that's basically kind of the attitude. Another thing, go watch ABC's Station 19. The last 3 episodes quite revealing about attitudes toward racism. Very focused. There's a counselor who sits with all the people who have been traumatized by the George Floyd thing. It is brilliant. So I'm highly recommend it to anyone to go check it. It's the last 2, maybe 3 episodes. So my question is this. This interesting thing about when you bring up racism from a societal historical standpoint, the first thing I notice is that the first thing I see a reaction, white people say that, even if they don't say it, I'm not a racist. And there is a difference between individual racism and societal historical. Can you speak to that?
Yes, and I can't give the workshop away, but we do make a distinction between, in our definition, it's a much wider net, what constitutes a racist. And so again, I don't want to give the workshop away, but again, I strongly recommend it. But there's a difference between being a bigot and being a racist. There's a difference between being part of a white supremacist culture where your thought is considered normative and every other thought is considered other and secondary. And it goes back to the Kenneth Clark study, which was repeated more recently with the same result, where the black girl said, I want the white doll. That still exists in America today. Not because you're bad people, it's because it's how we have been socialized.
Thank you. Okay, we have Frank, but just to let everyone know, it's 3 minutes to the hour. If you need to jump off, of course, know that that's okay, but we are going to stay a little bit longer, okay? Frank?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Dr. Ashley, for your comments, especially the comment about emotional homelessness. And thank you for your sharing about the stages of grief that America is going through in relationship to the end of racism. It's a powerful statement. I, of course, as a white man, cannot speak to the Black experience. I try to understand as much as possible, especially since I am married to a Black man who unfortunately will not have a conversation with me about this. Have conversations with my husband about what he's experienced, and occasionally he'll say a statement, but to have an actual conversation about this is very, it's not happening, and I don't understand that. But I can share that as a white gay man, I can understand the feelings and of the emotional homelessness, because for so long people say I should wave the flag and to say, oh, America's fabulous, but as a white gay man living in a society where I just barely got the right to marry my husband a few years ago, that I don't feel emotionally attached to America. I'm grateful here, but I do not feel emotionally attached to America. And a part of me is just so grateful for the fact that we are moving towards healing. My perception is that we are a greater state of oneness. It may take long past my generation. My hope is that my niece and nephew move into this an even better understanding of it. I would like to say I hope we'll make it in the next 50 years, but do you have any idea of how much longer we're going to be fighting this damn fight? I mean, I'm a child of the 60s. I'm fed up with it already.
So I want to applaud you for sharing what you did. And it helps me also kind of finish answering a question someone else had raised as well. So 3 of my 4 books are with an openly gay Jewish rabbi. And you Google it and it's right there. He's not hiding that he's gay. He's not hiding that he's Jewish. And he's not hiding that he and I are close. So you have a heterosexual Black Baptist pastor with an openly gay Jewish rabbi, both New York-based folks. And to the question that was asked a few questions ago, I've gone to give presentations mostly in religious circles. And while I'm talking, somebody pulls out their phone and starts to Google me, and they raise their hand and say, so make sure I understand this right. You're a Baptist pastor. Yeah. And I always know where this is going. And you're a Black guy. Yeah. So how can you support this? And I've had people literally walk out and said that I was a phony because you can't be a Black Baptist pastor and have books with openly gay Jewish rabbi person. So I'm striking, on the gay thing, on the Jewish thing. It's like, man, you're just striking out, dude, and I can't listen to you. I'm like, hey, I don't need the CEUs you do. Oh well, I guess we get them someplace else. Have a nice life. And so that I said it to say that Rabbi Stephan does have a different handle on my pain through the lens of what he experiences, the fear as an openly gay Jewish rabbi who had a congregation in North Carolina in the sticks. So you can imagine he could at least relate to some of the challenges that I put out there because he does have a point of reference. So I applaud that you have that point of reference. Because of my practice in Montclair, I do probably a third of my practice are couples, and most of those are interracial couples. And they're having the same conversation that you just raised. And several things, and I just do real quick. I'm not trying to be Dr. Phil and solve your situation online in 2 minutes because the camera's rolling. But oftentimes I will talk about the willingness and openness to talk about Black rage and the unconscious signals that we can give off saying, I'm not going there with you. And so I say in interracial relationships, if Black rage scares you, you may want to rethink your relationship. And not saying that you said that, but that's usually a starting point for us for going underground, because some way, shape, form, intentional or not, we communicated that your rage scares me. Now, talking about violence, talking about being able to express Black rage. And I really say this tongue in cheek, that imagine coming home and saying, oh my God, I hate white people today. Wait a minute, I'm horny, I want to have sex now. The disconnect. And so one of the things that we often do as Black people is that we're always protecting white people. Oh my God, you're a bunch of racists, but not you, but all the other zillion white people, they're racist, but not you. And so that makes us crazy. It just makes us crazy. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley. Thank you, Frank, for your question. Just again, we're over our usual time. Dr. Ashley, do you still have?
I'm good. I blocked out enough time, so okay. On my end, I'm good. If you keep going, I'll keep going.
Okay, good. And of course, I want to let you know that we're going to invite you back at some point to talk about Black rage.
Love to.
Yes. 2 more questions. We have Frida and then Stephanie.
Hi, thank you. I just appreciate it. I'll keep it short. I just appreciate the transparency of all the voices here. And as a reminder, and thank you for your example of working as a Black Baptist preacher with a gay Jewish rabbi. I want to make sure I had all of it right. That's beautiful example. And just a reminder, I was inspired by Jeff's story. I think it was Jeff. We always have a choice in these micro moments always have a choice, the micro moment, to decide what am I thinking is coming from what I know is true or what I've been taught to believe about other people. And thank you for today. I appreciate it.
And thank you. You know, one of the things I've been wrestling with is Harvard-trained Dr. Chester Pierce, when he invented the term microaggression in the early 70s, rethought it, wanted to change it, and they wouldn't let him change it. And why do you say that? Because to the person experiencing the aggression, it doesn't feel so micro. And it's another one of those terms, I think, that makes white people comfortable. Well, I didn't really hurt your feelings. It was a microaggression. So what's the big deal? Why are you making such a big deal of it? Because you did it, walked away. I took it home with me. I slept with it. I woke up with it the next day. I'm seeing you at work or in another place of socialization, and it's still with me. And if I don't address it and have a conversation, I come to see Will on his couch and have to write a check to talk about your microaggression.
Thank you. Ooh, Stephanie Cologne.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm speechless, but I will say this, Dr. Ashley. I embrace your sense of anti-Blackness. It just really resonates for me. The same with racialized trauma. I think too many therapists, particularly my experience with white therapists, refuse to look at the connection with post-traumatic stress and racialized trauma. So keep on being a beacon of light in that area. My question is, how do I battle Black exceptionalism in the face of white fragility and my unstoppable Black rage?
Mm-hmm. The Reader's Digest version answer is you have to call it out. One of my mentors and colleagues, Barbara Major, and I won't quote her because this is a children's channel, but she says, "Will, you have to call that stuff out," and that's a starting point. Yeah, when you see the exceptionalism taking place, you have to call it out. And because of who we are, you know, we have fallen into that exceptionalism category. You know, he has an earned doctorate, and he's a minister, and he's this and that. Oh God, he's the super Black guy. And you have to call it out and say, but can you respect the person down the street that isn't a super Black person, that isn't the super Negro, and that's not the word I want to really say. And so to call out exceptionalism, part one. Part two, I am thoroughly embarrassed in ways that we don't have enough time to go through. So I would just share the Reader's Digest version of my embarrassment. As I was writing my fourth book, I called my sisters, who were both brown. My dad was brown. My mother and I were the two fair-skinned ones in the family. And I called my brown-skinned sisters and asked them a question about how we were raised in our growing up. And they said, well, we wouldn't know about that because that person treated us differently than she treated you because you were the fair-skinned guy. I said, oh, no, not Mrs. So-and-so. She treated that. And she said, no. They said, Will, I need you to listen. She didn't have time for brown-skinned kids in our neighborhood. And after I started thinking about the people that were around us and around this person, I went, oh my God, you're right. She only gave time of day to folks my complexion and lighter. That was my embarrassing moment that I can't stop apologizing enough to my sisters that how in the hell did I miss that? Fast forward, I'm in the mail room at the institution where I'm the first Black dean, and the other administrators from the African diaspora were all in the mail room together and had this oh my God moment at the same time. The new quote unquote black academic dean, me, fair skin. The dean of students, my complexion. The director of our satellite program, my complexion. The associate dean, my complexion. And they had brown skinned faculty, some of whom were there before I showed up. It may not be intentional, it may not be conscious, but this anti-blackness is very real.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You validate me.
And my father, whom I love to death, was brown skinned. And I worked through all my Freudian 4 years on the couch 3 times a week stuff. So I can say with confidence, to this day, without overly romanticizing it, he's the smartest man I've ever known and has a 4th grade education. Because he figured this stuff out and how to negotiate it, how to navigate it, and how to raise his 3 kids, how to do the same.
Dr. Willard Ashley, thank you so much. Adine, I do see your hand up, but because of time, Stephanie was that last question. Thank you so very much. Lane, you want to close us out here? Again, Dr. Willard Ashley Sr., thank you so much for being here. Some of the comments in the chat have been, well, basically, we want to have you back. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we don't have you back, there will be a reckoning. And
we don't want that. We don't want that.
There'll be a reckoning. And thank you so much, Doctor. And I'm so grateful for Sandra Burnaby for connecting us. And I am still in contact with her, and I will send her a special letter of thanks this afternoon for bringing you and I together and bringing you here with all of us. We will have you back. We are starting our next series on June 2nd, so you can imagine that I will have you checking your calendar once again, sir, because
look forward to it.
To finish this, we do not want to end this. We will go ahead and let you go. I will again just put your About Me link into the chat so people can look you up. Correct? So that's okay with you.
Sounds good.
Right?
That works.
Okay,
that works,
sir. Thank you.
Thanks
so
again.
much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Race talk is a reckoning.
Thank you.
All right, Doctor. Thank you. All right, folks, for those of you who can stick around, we are still here until 1:30. We would love to have your comments just to get complete on our series. But for those of you who have to leave us, we will return June 2nd with another series of Race Talk. And I would like you to email me, please, with your requests and recommendations. What would you like to hear about? Are there people you'd like to hear from? There are several of you who have put things in the chat that you want to hear about. Can we talk about this and that? Send me a note. Eugene and I definitely want your input. This is a community effort here. This is a movement to involve people that matter and have people expressed, appreciated, and that is going to come from you guys as much, if not more, than me and Eugene. So please do send us that information. Eugene, where should we start? I'll tell you, I'm so excited about that last conversation. I could talk Blue Streak, but let's not do that. Do we want to open the floor? Who would like to talk about perhaps something you've learned, something you'd like to share, just to close out this series of Race Talk? Eugene, do you have something you want to share first?
Well, there was something, that was so relevant or so powerful to me, hearing emotional homelessness. And I remember having an experience. I didn't attach the experience to this particular phrase until now, right? And was at this large spiritual center where my practitioner license was being held. And I was always told that, yes, you belong here. And I've been doing this for a long time in this particular circle. I am well known. And what I came to find out, and is that you belong here as long as you do it in the way we want you to do it. You belong here as long as you show up the way we want you to show up. And if I came, when I came, not if, when I came and started to express myself as a Black man, you know, because that's the only way that I can. And then I started to get this feedback, or started to get this not feedback, this pushback. You know, sometimes Eugene drops the F-bomb. Sometimes Eugene sounds like an angry Black man. I'm like, wow, really? Because I'm not Eugene, the manager of the World Ministry of Prayer. You know, it's like, well, but this is who I am. So this emotional homelessness left me feeling homeless. You know, it was such an interesting experience. You know, and someone was asking me, did I think it was because of their hidden biases, right? And I'm like, you know, I'm not going to call anyone racist or anything like that. However, however, would this happen if I weren't a Black man, right? Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that up. Yeah, man. Whew. I see that Bill, now that you're, sorry about that, Bill. And I want to go ahead and lower Bill's hand. And if you want to go ahead and unmute, or if anyone has, yeah, never mind. Go ahead,
sure,
Bill.
I'll just go quick, couple minutes for Max. Yeah, I think the homelessness, what I hear is disconnected, you know, aimless, untethered. And I think, you know, I think I'm putting out there, you know, if you think of the range of emotions that you have as a human, you know, all humans have these range of emotions. Some are quote positive, some are ones that are hard to deal with. They blow through our, you know, our being, you know, depending on things that happen around us, depending on thoughts in our head. And I do think this topic of rage and heartbreak that's underneath the rage is a really, really important one. I think white fragility is just a almost subconscious reaction to, like, I know there's a lot of tension over there. There's a lot of anger. I'm going to put up like these early warning systems that slow it right down before it gets anywhere near its peak, and make sure, you know, that it's really contained, you know, kept far away, like an early defense system. But I do think like the rage has to be expressed, but how to express it in a way that doesn't alienate, that doesn't, you know, further divide, which is what we saw under Trump. You know, my wife is Indian, was in an arranged marriage, grew up with zero freedom, like really zero freedom. And to be in her life, I have to embrace and allow her full expression of her rage, because she can't be herself without that, you know, being stuck and hidden in the background and kept, you know, only so much for this white guy. You know, I can only, and, you know, historically, my people from England basically dominated that country for 200 years as a, like most colonies, like just as a complete fiefdom. So yeah, this rage has to be embraced on a day-to-day level in individual relationships, whoever you happen to have in your life, or that person across the street. Like, we have to take it on. But we are, when we so often learn to deal with rage from when we're a kid. You know, we're not a fully adult, and we create a lot of fear and defensiveness and protectiveness. But I really believe that as full adults, we can deal with people's rage. We can learn to allow rage to be expressed, not particularly at us specifically, but be vocalized. And also, how can we support the conversation around what is fueling the rage so that we can work on it together and have a place for it, so it doesn't show up in these relationships like that loving couple where he shared about his partner. You know, how can we work to really bring this into the space and get past that? Have a real...
Bill, thank you so much, Bill, for that. I just want to say that what you're sharing brings me to mind is that there were people asking for specific information about the Undoing Racism workshop. And that is a very good place to start in that conversation of unpacking hidden rage, suppressed rage, stuff like that. And that is offered by the Anti-Racist Alliance. So antiracist.alliance.org. Anybody who wants to find out about the Undoing Racism workshop,
I'll follow up with you.
That's a great place for you to take a look, to start that work, Bill. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Can you put that in the chat, please?
Indeed, I will. Eugene, you want to go to Norman while I'm chatting?
How are you doing? I'm having a problem with understanding the place that Black rage is being put in. I don't see that as a problem. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. I mean, if it's true rage, what needs to be done, what something needs to be done about is the white guilt. Every time I get into a discussion with white people and they ask me what I think should be done, I always say that you need to start telling the truth. And that truth should start when education starts, when children are very young. People don't want to do that because they think that, white people don't want to do that because they think that it's going to make their children hate this country. That, if you don't hate it and you know the truth, why should they? I mean, there would be no Black rage were it not for the white guilt, in my opinion. Now, y'all can respond any way you like.
I'd love to speak on that if that's okay, Eugene. Norman,
Sure.
I love that you said that. Thank you. Because, we talk about calling a spade, right? Like Dr. Ashley was saying, you got to call that stuff out. And one of the things that I'm sure he would speak to that very well, because he said often when he is speaking with his white colleagues and in psychotherapist circles, and they're talking about talking with white and Black patients or clients about anger, and they're saying, well, people don't want to experience the anger. They don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be angry. And what he is saying to them is, but if you don't allow people to express the anger, they don't get to anything else, right? Unless you actually can speak about your anger and get to the core of it and say what you need to say, there's no way for you to heal. So you are absolutely, completely correct. The rage is there and must be addressed, and there's nothing wrong with it. And it needs to be expressed the way it needs to be expressed before it can be constructive, right? So people say, well, rage isn't constructive. Well, okay, that's fine, but you're not going to construct a whole lot unless you are dealing first on the level of what is. And absolutely, in the absence of denial, would there be any reason for people's anger to elevate or escalate to the level of rage? So you've made quite a good point. And we look forward to having that conversation when we ask him back too, Norman. Thank you for that. Absolutely.
Sure.
Folks, we're here for another 8 minutes. Would anybody like to say something to complete this series of Race Talk for You?
Felicia.
That's Frida. Oh.
Frida, not Felicia.
Frida, would you do me the honor, please, of turning your camera on, Frida? We would love to see your face.
Oh, I can't today. I'm so sorry. I'm
you
in a
can't
public
turn
space.
your camera on, girlfriend? Okay, well, I'll pretend
I'm
that I'm
so
looking at your
sorry.
face.
I'm so
All
sorry.
right.
I totally could, but not today. I cannot. But I'm so glad I tuned in. I did not know this was wrapping up. You've done an amazing job. I was invited by someone, and it's just, you guys have just done an amazing job. I just wanted to I'm inspired by what was just shared about cause and effect. Black rage is a result of, some could say white fragility. It's a cause of perhaps things even stemming from, as he discussed, anti-racism or racism, I should say, or anti-Blackness. It's stemming from a lot of things. I think what you guys have provided, which I think is really key, which is what pulled me coming back, is you provided a space for both white fragility and Black rage to coexist, regardless of the cause and effect of it. You've created this space, you both as facilitators of this space, and I think that's lended a lot of space for healing, which I think is a wonderful outcome overall, because regardless of the cause or effect, chicken or the egg, not discrediting what has occurred, but recognizing there is a choice to decide to create something new. And when bringing these two spaces of Black rage and white fragility and all the other things that we haven't put into those two phrases, you just have created this opportunity for healing, which I think ultimately is what all of us want to create. No one wants Black rage. No one really wants white fragility. We don't want this to keep working the way it's working. We want something different. So thank you for providing this space. I was super inspired by Dr. Ashley's statement that America's in the space of dealing with early stages of the death of racism.
Yeah.
And how we're in the first stages of denial and anger. And I just looked that up and I was like, wow, we got 5 stages. So I don't know. Are we, I think he's right. We've got denial, anger. I mean, I feel like we're in all of them, bargaining, depression. I just hope that we get to acceptance sooner than later. And thank you for making space available to help us get to the acceptance of the death of racism. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Frida.
Wow. Thank you.
Virginia, and then Robert Harris.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. I wanted to suggest a topic for the future, dealing with critical race theory, and maybe you already have brought the speaker on and I missed it. But you know, this is becoming a really important thing because so many conservatives across the country now are trying to block any kind of educational programs that would teach critical race theory. And, you know, if where we have to start is educating our kids when they're young, well, it's a huge problem if critical race theory is not being taught. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Mr. Robert Harris.
Unmute.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So echoing what other people have said, thank you for providing, well, it's more than a forum, but for doing what you've been doing. And I want to appreciate the difficulty of doing that, the complexity of even trying. So give you a big thanks on that and appreciation on that. As a possible future topic, and you may have already covered it in some of your previous series, maybe talking about racism and sex, or racism and sexuality, or racism and love. And it's not because that's original with me, but just get people's thoughts on that. Anyway, but again, there's many ways up the mountain, as I'm sure people have heard before, and I want to appreciate your efforts and work in showing the different sides of the mountain. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert.
So we'll make this, we'll make Jason the last question.
Yeah, thank you. And just thank you so much, Eugene and Lane, for this remarkable forum. I wanted to ask a question, and I think, well, I'll just say it. It seems to me that before white fragility was really recognized, or at least certainly before I was aware of it, that that Black rage would be rooted in the incredible injustice that existed, and that white fragility is a, I don't know, it's like that comes later, right? There's the tremendous injustice, there's the rage about the injustice, then there's trying to deal with white people about the injustice, and that's kind of where the white fragility shows up, which just creates more rage. So I'm curious, do I have that modeled correctly, or am I missing something? And actually, Norman, I really appreciated what you were saying about this, and that's kind of what sparked this question in me.
Well, from my point of view, you know, and Jason, that's a great question, you know, and I'm going to speak from my experiences. And no, I don't think that you're far off at all. You know, Black rage has been around for, you know, I mean, just, you know, because of the injustices, right? You know, for example, you know, my grandfather had to be ushered out of Texas because he spit on a white woman for, you know, for talking down to him, and they had to usher him out of Texas, you know, because they knew that he was going to be hanged, but he was tired of being treated in the way that he was treated, and then and watching how everyone else, you know, his complexion and African Americans and the African diaspora, you know, were treated. So this Black rage. I mean, we can go, you know, history in the USA, you know, tells us and shows us the inequalities. You know, it's an interesting thing. And this is one of the reasons why, wow, really? Cool. This is one of the reasons why I continue to do race talk, because it's my way of dealing with the rage. You wouldn't believe it, but the rage that is within me. You know, I just happen to have a different way of expressing it. Now, the white guilt, the white fragility, you know, because of today's technology, right? Stuff is being shown, right? And cameras are out, and then we get to hear it. And I think it was Professor Luis Quiros who talked about, you know, he was glad that President Trump got elected. And the reason why is because it brought all of this up. And now it's in everyone's face. And so there are these, and I'm going to say it like this, these conscious, the conscious white brothers and sisters who are going, oh my God, didn't know this was going on. I feel so bad about this, right? And so you're not off. You're not off of it. How can I say this? You are right on, right? It feels like this white fragility, this white guilt is a brand new thing. And it's so something that we get to work through. It's something that we get to work through together, you know? And so I think it's a wonderful thing, you know, a wonderful time for all of us to be on the planet doing this particular work, you know? Yeah, it's good stuff. Okay, well, so with where I think where Lane was going, we are both, and we get to talk about it, you know, every week, not just on the show. She and I connect once a week to talk about, you know, Race Talk Revolution and where it's going and how it's grown and how it is expanded, and mainly it's because of what you guys bring and what you are asking for, and we couldn't do this without you. And that's why I keep saying your voice matters. It sounds like it's a catchy catchphrase, but it's really, really the truth. All of our voice matters in this thing called, you know, racism in America. But also what we're doing is coming together, you know, saying, you know what, I can learn from you, you can learn from me, and how do we do this? And so it's a beautiful, beautiful way that Lane and I both get to give back. But not only do we get to give back, we receive so much. So thank you so very much. So very much. On behalf of Lane, the Reverend Lane Cobb, and myself, we love you. We will see you June 2nd. We're going to, you know, take those weeks off, you know, these couple of weeks off, and we're going to come back just as strong, just as powerful, and we are looking forward to seeing you back with us.